God, I love these stunt people. They're so wonderful. They're so incredible. And you know what? Best people on set. It was intellectual, philosophical rock and roll opera. I think I finally got it.
It was just nice. It was like, somebody asked me what I was feeling like before, and I said the two words that come to mind are electric and jelly.
That's a lovely way to describe the film, electric and jelly. Thank you, Tom Back. I'm Max, and this is Flip Your Wig, and we are about to celebrate Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, which had its world premiere at the Cannes Film Festival this week. And after that, the cast and crew sat down for a press conference with the world media. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. Anya Taylor-Joy, George Miller, Chris Hemsworth, Tom Back, they're all there. Enjoy.
The one thing you can say about cinema is that it's always evolving and changing, and particularly the technology. I mean, I started making films in the analog era with celluloid, where it was quite different. And I was lucky enough to work at the beginning of the digital era, roughly the early 90s, particularly with the Babe films and consequently with the Happy Feet movies, where I really got to understand it a lot. And it's one of the vectors which really drives my filmmaking. Story is above it all else, and then it's what tools are now available that we can do this.
I mean, listen, no action movie, specifically Mad Max, exists without an absolutely unbelievable stunt department. We had the incredible Guy Norris, who was a stuntman on the first ever Mad Max, leading our second unit that was in charge of all of Stowaway. And beyond that, I think when George and I first had a conversation, it was very important to him that I was willing to throw myself into it as much as I possibly could. But even if you are throwing yourself into it as much as you possibly can, there's somebody that has previs that has tested it, that has taught you how to do it. Like, my stunt double, Haley Wright, is my sister. She has been with me consistently. We met on this movie. She's now one of my best friends in the entire world. Everything that she did, I did too. And the most important thing is, rather than it being an environment of aggression in any way of like, you have to do this, it was, I love you, I believe in you, you can do this, and I'm going to help you do it in the best possible way that you can.
I'm a big believer in the playfulness of work and the two not having to be separate entities. No matter what the subject matter, I think it should be joyful. And the interesting thing about this character initially that struck me was there was this villainous persona, but it was very important for George and I, we discussed this at length, to find the humanity in the character and to sprinkle in moments of vulnerability and understand that he too was a product of the wasteland. He too had suffered tremendously and had a traumatic past. Not to excuse his horrific actions, but to understand that he was responding and trying to survive in a very brutal space.
I grew up in a rural town where at a time there was no television, there was no internet, there was just schools, comics, school books, and the Saturday matinee. And it was a little bit like the movie theatre in town was like a secular cathedral or church. And we'd go there and we'd see a cartoon, newsreels, a serial, and 2 features. And the rest of the time, we were lucky enough with my brothers and I to play. We played actively, making things based on what we saw in the movies, acting out what we saw. We were on horses, we were painting up garbage can lids to look like knights and things like that. And I think I'm doing a very, very similar thing all these decades later. It was a big influence on me.
There's so many different types of love in the world, and I think a really beautiful love that's not often talked about is, yes, it's romantic, but it's also just a true belief in somebody's ideals. He falls in love with her dream. He falls in love with her promise. He doesn't fall in love with her body necessarily, and I thought that was a really beautiful thing to experience on screen, and especially with somebody as lovely and talented as Tom. You know, I felt like every time that we were just the two of us together, there's so much subtext being played out, and we're communicating without words, and so that was lovely for me. You?
Yeah, we wanted to map that really carefully, and the fact is it starts with them being a team without even... He doesn't even know who his teammate is. He thinks it's Black Thumb, and suddenly it's, you know, there's this flowing hair at
Feral creature.
on it. Yeah, feral flowing hair. So, yeah, it was nice to map that carefully and know that all of us wanted it to be the most interesting, kind of gentle journey, and not a version of something.
Yeah. It's also my favorite line in the movie. It's been a hard day. Like, yeah, it has, mate. It really has.
Everything that you design or want to be seen in the frame has to serve the story. So every costume is an extension, of course, of the character. Every prop, every weapon, every vehicle. And if you look at all these stories, there's a very strong connection between the aesthetic of the vehicle and, in a sense, the aesthetic of the character. So that's really important. And so it is with the locations. There has to be a progression through the story of those things. Everything serves the progression of the story.
It's not very often that you can be part of a universe where it looks very detailed from far away, and then you walk into it and you go, oh, wow, as I get closer, everything's just more and more multi-layered. There's nothing by accident, and I think you can feel that in the filmmaking.
The first Mad Max was dubbed, in the United States, was dubbed with American accents, even though Mel Gibson was American himself. And the film completely flopped in America. Hugh Keys-Byrne, who played Toe Cutter, was from the Royal Shakespeare Company, and yet he spoke with a Southern American accent. It took all this time for almost every accent in this story to be American, to be Australian, and we never even really discussed it. You started speaking in an Australian accent, I think the accent of your grandfather. And then we have someone like Tom arrive and says, I want to do an Australian accent. I said, don't try it, it's too difficult. And great people have tried it, really great people. It's not a common sort of accent. But Tom...
Meryl Streep.
Well...
My baby.
Yes, but even Meryl at that time, as genius as she is, didn't quite nail it, I believe. That was in the 70s. 80s, mid-70s, was it?
That was 35 years ago.
35 years ago. Look, when I first went to the United States and we said we were from Australia, they said, do you speak English? They thought we were Austrian. and anyway, I've just got to say, I thought, okay, Tom, let's see you fail. And suddenly, he's speaking in this Australian accent. He has that ability to do it. It blew me away. And I've spent a year in the cutting room listening to it. And that's a really nice thing to happen. It's specifically Australia in this story, just to respond to you.
Apparently there's an entire counter of people in the airport for people who are trying to get to Australia and accidentally end up in Austria. Which, like, I don't know about you guys, but that would suck.
We wrote... In order to tell the story of Fury Road, we had to know the backstory of Furiosa and of Max in the year before. And that was a tool for the cast and crew. And so we know the Max story for the year before. But I'll definitely wait to see how this goes before we even think about this.
Okay, guys, that was a press conference from the Cannes Film Festival with the cast and crew of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. Congratulations to George Miller. It's good to have him back. The film is out in UK cinemas on the 24th of May. Make sure you subscribe. There is also an interview with Anya and Chris Hemsworth on the channel right now for more detail on what you can expect from their roles. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so you don't miss any updates. I'm Max, and this is Flip Your Wig.